In the heart of West Africa, where the land hums with the weight of history and the promise of resilience, a young military captain named Ibrahim Traoré emerged as an unlikely architect of Burkina Faso's future. It was September 2022, and the nation was reeling from a cascade of crises: insurgent violence, economic stagnation, and a growing disillusionment with foreign influence. When Traoré, then just 34 years old, led a coup to seize power, he ignited a spark of hope for some and a firestorm of controversy for others. His leadership would become a crucible, forging a path through chaos with audacious reforms, shifting alliances, and an unrelenting quest for sovereignty. This is the story of a man, a movement, and a nation at a crossroads. The air was thick with anticipation when Captain Traoré first spoke to his people as their leader. His voice, steady yet imbued with urgency, carried the weight of a nation's expectations. Burkina Faso, a landlocked country of 22 million, had long been battered by the winds of instability. The jihadist insurgency that began in the north had spread like wildfire, displacing millions and claiming thousands of lives. Economic hardship gnawed at the populace, while the shadow of foreign powers, particularly France, the former colonial ruler, loomed large. Traoré, a soldier who had risen through the ranks, promised a break from the past. He vowed to restore security, reclaim national pride, and wrest control of Burkina Faso's destiny from external hands. One of Traoré's boldest gambits was to turn Burkina Faso's natural wealth into a cornerstone of his vision. The nation sits atop vast reserves of gold, a resource that has long fueled global markets but left local communities with little to show for it. In April 2025, Prime Minister Jean-Emmanuel Ouédraogo, a close ally of Traoré, stood before a press conference in Ouagadougou and announced a seismic shift. The government would nationalize more foreign-owned industrial mines. The declaration sent ripples through the international mining industry, which had grown accustomed to lucrative concessions in Burkina Faso. "This is our wealth, our heritage," Ouédraogo proclaimed, his words punctuated by the nods of government officials seated behind him. "For too long, others have profited while our people struggle. That ends now." The nationalization plan was the culmination of a broader strategy that began the previous year with the revision of Burkina Faso's mining code. The new code tightened regulations on foreign companies, demanding higher royalties and stricter environmental standards. At its heart was the creation of the Société de Participation Minière du Burkina, or SOPAMIB, a state-owned mining company tasked with reclaiming control of the nation's mineral wealth. SOPAMIB wasted no time. By early 2025, it had taken over two major gold mines previously operated by Endeavour Mining, a Canadian-based multinational. The move was a direct challenge to the status quo, signaling that Burkina Faso would no longer be a passive player in the global resource game. For Traoré, the stakes were clear. Gold was not just a commodity, but a lifeline for an economy battered by years of conflict and mismanagement. The revenue from these mines, he argued, would fund schools, hospitals, and infrastructure, projects that could lift millions out of poverty. Yet, the nationalization effort was not without risks. Foreign investors bristled, and some warned of legal battles or economic retaliation. At home, Traoré's supporters hailed him as a champion of sovereignty, while critics cautioned that mismanagement could squander the opportunity. In the streets of the capital, the nationalization debate was a microcosm of the broader tensions surrounding Traoré's rule. For many Burkinabe, the sight of their country asserting control over its resources was a source of pride. "This is what Sankara would have done," one vendor remarked, invoking the memory of Thomas Sankara, the revolutionary leader assassinated in 1987. Sankara's legacy, a blend of anti-imperialism, self-reliance, and social justice, loomed large over Traoré's rhetoric. Like Sankara, Traoré positioned himself as a defender of the marginalized, a leader who would prioritize the needs of the many over the interests of the few. Yet others worried that the government's inexperience and the ongoing security crisis could undermine these ambitious reforms. If gold was the economic backbone of Traoré's vision, security was its foundation. The jihadist insurgency, linked to groups like Al-Qaeda and the Islamic State, had plunged Burkina Faso into one of the world's most severe humanitarian crises. By 2022, nearly half the country was outside government control, with rebel forces launching increasingly brazen attacks on civilian and military targets. Traoré, a battle-hardened officer who had fought on the front lines, knew that his legitimacy rested on his ability to restore order. In April 2023, he took a dramatic step. Standing before a backdrop of Burkinabe flags, Traoré declared a general mobilization of the population. Every citizen has a role to play, he urged, calling on civilians to support the military in its fight against the insurgents. The mobilization was more than a call to arms. It was a rallying cry for national unity in the face of existential threats. Traoré pledged to reconquer every inch of rebel-held territory, vowing that there would be no negotiations until the insurgency was significantly weakened. The mobilization transformed Burkina Faso's security landscape. Thousands of civilians joined the Volunteers for the Defense of the Homeland, VDP, a militia force that Traoré described as the nation's Wagner, a nod to the Russian mercenaries who would later become a controversial part of his strategy. The VDP, composed largely of local farmers, traders, and youth, became a symbol of grassroots resistance. Armed with rudimentary weapons and fueled by a sense of duty, these volunteers patrolled villages, gathered intelligence, and supported regular troops in operations. For Traoré, the VDP was a pragmatic response to a stretched military, but it also carried risks. Reports of human rights abuses by VDP members began to surface, raising concerns about accountability in a country already scarred by violence. Traoré's resolve was tested in September 2023, when elements within the military launched a coup to overthrow him. The attempt was a stark reminder of the fragility of his grip on power. Burkina Faso had a long history of coups, 8 successful ones since independence in 1960, and Traoré's rise had already alienated some factions within the armed forces. The plotters, reportedly disgruntled over Traoré's leadership style and his pivot away from traditional allies like France, underestimated his support. Loyalist forces swiftly quashed the rebellion, and Traoré emerged stronger, but the incident left scars. It underscored the precariousness of his position and the need to consolidate his authority. In May 2024, Traoré sought to legitimize his rule through national consultations. The gatherings, held in Ouagadougou, were billed as a forum for charting Burkina Faso's future. Civil society groups, traditional leaders, and religious figures filled the room, their voices echoing with calls for stability and progress. Yet, the absence of most political parties cast a shadow over the proceedings. Many opposition leaders boycotted the consultations, accusing Traoré of orchestrating a sham to entrench his power. Their fears were not unfounded. When the consultations concluded, the delegates extended Traoré's mandate for an additional 5 years and granted him the right to contest the next presidential elections, a decision that sparked both cheers and condemnation. For Traoré's supporters, the extended mandate was a necessary step to ensure continuity in a time of crisis. "He is the only one who can save us," a young woman declared at a rally, her voice rising above the crowd. But for his critics, the move was a dangerous slide toward authoritarianism. They pointed to the sidelining of political parties and the growing cult of personality around Traoré as signs of a deeper erosion of democratic norms. The consultations, meant to unify, instead deepened the divide between those who saw Traoré as a savior and those who feared he was becoming a strongman. On the global stage, Traoré's leadership was equally transformative and polarizing. In February 2023, his government made a stunning announcement. It was expelling hundreds of French troops from Burkina Faso. The decision was a direct rebuke of France, which had maintained a military presence in the Sahel for decades under the guise of counter-terrorism. For many Burkinabe, France's influence was a lingering vestige of colonialism, and Traoré's move was a bold assertion of independence. Crowds gathered in Ouagadougou to celebrate, waving Burkinabe flags and burning French ones in a display of defiance. To fill the void left by France, Traoré turned to new partners. Turkey, with its growing influence in Africa, provided military equipment and training. Russia, however, emerged as the most significant ally. In January 2024, Russian troops, including members of the Wagner group, arrived in Burkina Faso to bolster security efforts. The deployment was a lightning rod for controversy. Wagner, a private military company with a notorious reputation, had been accused of human rights abuses in other African countries. Traoré, ever the pragmatist, downplayed direct ties to Wagner. "Our Wagner are the VDP," he quipped, framing the Russian presence as a secondary support to homegrown efforts. Yet, the partnership raised eyebrows, both at home and abroad, as Burkina Faso deepened its alignment with Moscow. Traoré's foreign policy was not limited to bilateral ties. In a bid to strengthen regional solidarity, his government proposed a federation with Mali and Guinea, two neighbouring countries also led by military juntas. The idea of a tri-nation union, which would create the largest military-ruled state in Africa, was both ambitious and fraught with challenges. All three countries faced similar struggles: insurgencies, economic woes, and international isolation. And Traoré saw unity as a path to resilience. "Together, we are unstoppable," he declared at a summit in Bamako. The federation remained a work in progress, but it underscored Traoré's vision of a self-reliant Africa, free from Western dominance. Back home, Traoré's popularity soared among segments of the population, particularly the youth. In late 2024, thousands took to the streets of Ouagadougou to defend the junta after a foiled coup attempt and sharp criticism from US General Michael Langley. Langley had accused Traoré of misusing gold revenues, a charge that ignited fury among Traoré's base. The rally was a spectacle of defiance. Anti-American slogans, pro-Russia banners, and fervent support for Traoré filled the air. For these supporters, Traoré was more than a leader. He was a symbol of resistance against a world order they viewed as exploitative. Yet, even as Traoré basked in public adulation, the challenges of governance remained daunting. The insurgency showed no signs of abating, with attacks continuing to devastate rural communities. The economy, while buoyed by gold revenues, struggled to deliver tangible improvements for ordinary Burkinabe. And the spectre of internal dissent, within the military, among political elites and from civil society, loomed large. Traoré's ability to balance his revolutionary rhetoric with practical governance would determine whether his legacy would echo Sankara's or falter under the weight of its own ambitions. As the sun sets over Burkina Faso, Captain Ibrahim Traoré stands at the helm of a nation in flux. His tenure, marked by audacious reforms and unrelenting resolve, has redefined the country's trajectory. He is a man of contradictions, a soldier who dreams of peace, a nationalist who courts foreign allies, a revolutionary who governs with an iron hand. Whether he will lead Burkina Faso to a new dawn or into deeper uncertainty remains an open question. But one thing is certain: Traoré's story, like the land he seeks to transform, is one of struggle, sacrifice, and an unyielding pursuit of sovereignty. In the heart of the Sahel, a young leader dares to dream of a better future. His path is fraught with peril, but his resolve is unbreakable. This is Burkina Faso's story, and the world is watching.